You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Good evening. My name is Peter Bass. I'm chairman of the Branford Inland Wetland Commission. It is now 7 o'clock on October 12th, 2023. We have a regularly scheduled meeting of the Branford Inland Wetland Commission this evening. Let's see, the meeting is being held in accordance with Public Act 22.3. All speakers are asked to identify themselves when speaking. It may be helpful to use the raise your hand feature when it's that opportunity to speak. BCTV is recording this evening. They provide a very good public service. They have asked that when speaking, you make sure that your face is in the screen so that the public can identify the face with the voice. I think the first things we will do this evening is do a call to order. Commissioner Boda.
Commissioner Boda, present.
Commissioner Steinberg.
Commissioner Steinberg, present.
Commissioner Ormrod.
Commissioner Ormrod, present.
Commissioner Golkowski. Commissioner Golkowski.
Sorry, Commissioner Golkowski, present.
Commissioner Begerman.
Commissioner Begeman, present.
Let's see, I think all commissioners in attendance are seated and can participate in this evening's discussion. We have also two members of staff with us this evening. Enforcement Officer Jamie Frederick.
Present.
Inland Wetland Associate Katie Blanchette.
Present.
That concludes the roll call. The agenda is posted on the town's website, was mailed out to the commissioners, and the agenda we are using this evening is that which was filed October 10th, 2023, which superseded the October 6th agenda. Any changes to the agenda, Jamie?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. There was an application received yesterday. So I would recommend that the commission vote to add that under applications for receipt. The application is for 35 Beechwood Road and it's IW number 231002.
That address again, Jamie?
35 Beechwood Road, and I'd recommend the commission add it to the agenda as item 3B.
This is Commissioner Boda. I'll make a motion that we add 35 Beechwood Road, IW 231002 to item 3B under applications for receipt.
In a second?
Commissioner Steinberg, I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Any abstaining? Thank you. That completes the additions to the agenda or changes to the agenda, Jamie?
Yes.
Okay. We have minutes for approval. 2 minutes for approval, September 14th, 2023, regular meeting minutes. Again, these are posted on the town's website. Commissioners are in possession of those minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the September 14th, 2023 minutes?
Commissioner Steinberg, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Hopefully there's a second.
Commissioner Golkowski, I'll second that.
Any discussion on those minutes? Any abstentions on the approval of those minutes?
This is Commissioner Boda. I will abstain from the September 14th minutes.
And this is
Anybody else?
Commissioner Begemon will abstain from the September 14th regular meeting minutes.
Is anybody opposed to the minutes being approved? Okay, I guess all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
great. Next up, special meeting minutes of October 5th, 2023. I believe that was a one-pager. Is there a motion to approve the October 5th special meeting minutes?
This is Commissioner Boda. I will make a motion to approve the special meeting minutes, October 5th, 2023.
And a second?
Commissioner Ormrod, I'll second that.
Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any abstentions? Any nays? Okay. We're now going to open the public hearing. Inland Wetland 230702, 38 Howard Avenue. This is the retaining wall construction and associated activities. And this includes activities proposed on 34 Howard Avenue. Let's see, the notice of violation on this was issued April 24th of this year. And an application was filed in July of this year. At the September meeting, the commission determined that we would pursue a public hearing this evening. A couple comments on the public hearing for those who may not have been in attendance in one previously. This is a meeting of the Inland Wetland Agency. The purpose of the meeting is, or the hearing, I should say, is a fact-finding mission to understand the application for permit in its entirety. The Branford Inland Wetlands are governed by statute in Connecticut 22A, as well as our town regulations, which are drawn from 22A and modeled after a set of regulations issued by the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Commission applies these regulations in a fair and uniform manner across all applications that come before us, meaning everyone conforms to the same standard. Commissioners that are seated for this application are required to be fair and independent and not predisposed to any application. Commission must decide the merit of the application from the facts as they appear in the record and from their own personal observation and technical experience. At this point, I ask, is there any commissioner who needs to recuse themselves from the public hearing this evening? Hearing none, the commission is not an environmental review board. It does not deal with planning and zoning issues. It is a wetlands agency, so we want to hear about activities that may have a direct impact or effect on wetlands and or watercourses. We accept applications as they are proposed and either approve or deny them. It is not uncommon for conditions to be included for permits granted. Commission has the responsibility to determine whether the application is consistent with its regulations. It is important that the applicant has full opportunity to disclose the details of the application. The commission will ask questions generally about that application, and once both the applicant and the commission is satisfied those questions, then the floor will be open to the public for their comments. Permit decisions must be concluded within timeframes specified by the Connecticut statute and our regulations. Jamie, at this point, is there anything that needs to be said before? And first of all, do we have the applicant from 38 Howard Avenue here this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chair. James Perito from Halloran and Sage. I represent the owners, Kim McCabe and Charlie Watts of 38 Howard Avenue here on the application.
Thank you. Jamie, is there anything that you want to interject at this point before we turn it over to Mr. Perito?
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland Agent. So there is some minor activity on 34 Howard Ave. It's been previously discussed that authorization from the property owners for 34 Howard Ave would be required prior to further review of the application. So unfortunately, based on past practice, it would be my recommendation to the commission to continue this matter to the next or an alternative meeting after that authorization can be received, because we don't currently have it on hand, unless that's something that we're expecting to receive this evening.
Mr. Chair, if I could address that, James Perito for the applicant. We completed revised plans, which are in the record and were submitted about a week ago, and we sent those over to the owners of 34 Howard and their attorney, and we asked for consent simply for that aspect of our application, which deals with a very small portion of the retaining wall, which inadvertently was installed over the property line by about 3 or 4 inches. We were informed that consent would not be forthcoming until all issues were resolved. So I don't believe a continuance is going to make any difference on that. I mentioned this to Jamie, and I'll say this to the commission. I believe that the owners of 34 Howard have intervened, requested intervention status. They've been granted intervention status. So they are parties to not just the application, but the NOV. So they're here. Your commission has jurisdiction over them because they're part of these proceedings as a party. It would seem to me that you could deal with them with or without consent under the NOV, and certainly under the application because they've intervened. So I would request that we proceed with the public hearing. People are here tonight, experts are here tonight, so you can do your fact-finding gathering, and if that's an outstanding issue, then the commission can deal with it when you have your deliberations, on the application and the NOV. So I'd ask that we proceed tonight.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, did you indicate that it has been our practice, or are there, given the fact that this is now a public hearing, restrictions within the context of the public hearing that would prevent us from discussing the item this evening?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So there's a regulation that requires authorization from all property owners for an application. So the property owners at 34 Howard are interveners. I've discussed with town council, and he agrees that being an intervener and authorization are 2 separate things. I also briefly discussed with him to confirm kind of the what to do without having the authorization, and he agreed that we should stick to the standard practice of continuing the application, so that information can be submitted.
As a follow, this Commissioner Basserman, as a follow-up, to the extent that that we continue this discussion till the next meeting, where are we on the timing regarding statute and regulations?
So first, the state statutes, the commission has 65 days to open the public hearing, which we've done at this point. And then if a public hearing is held, the agency has 35 days to complete the public hearing. And then 35 days to make a decision after the public hearing has been closed. The commission can request extensions from the applicant not to exceed 65 days.
This Commissioner Basserman, are we at that point where we would need to do that this evening if we were to move this to the November meeting?
No, we are not. Since the public hearing was just open tonight, there's 35 days before the commission would have to request an extension.
Okay. As a follow-up question, again, Commissioner Basserman, if in fact the abutting property owner were not to grant that okay, could they hold up this whole process?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I think that would be something I'd have to follow up with town council on.
Okay. Any questions, comments, or concerns from the commission regarding abiding by the regulations that we have and moving this to the November meeting as opposed to a discussion this evening?
Commissioner Goklowski, I believe we should move it to the November meeting. And I'm not quite understanding why the abutting property owner is not working with this process, but that's not my call. I think we should move it to the next meeting if we're within statutory limitations.
This is Commissioner Boda. Are the property owners for 34 Howard or a representative here that can speak to this issue?
Yes, Keith Ainsworth. I'm an attorney from New Haven who represents Stephen Diaz Romero and Sophia Nuri, the owners of 34 Howard Avenue. And if someone asked me, I would have told you that it is highly unlikely that permission will be granted because the applicant, who we are not, by the way, we are not parties to the application. We're parties to this proceeding under the Environmental Protection Act. There's a different standard for that. But they have not solved the problems they've created. And we've told them in very clear written and expressed terms that if they don't solve the problems they created, the flooding and the crowding, and come to a global solution, then we will not give permission. And it won't happen whether you do it here now or in November or December or January or February. Where this will head next is to the Superior Court if they refuse to talk to us, because all they've done is dictated to us by handing us plans and saying, this is what we're doing and we need your permission. They haven't ever asked us what we would like, and they've never had the decency to ask. Oh, one more point. If the commission were to try to force my client and override our ability to give permission and give permission to do something on their property, we would consider that a trespass and a violation of our constitutional property rights. I don't think that would be an area where you'd want to head.
Chairman Basserman, you have a hand raised by Attorney Perito, just so you're aware.
I was not aware, so thank you about that. Let's see, Mr. Perito, you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to debate the allegations that Attorney Ainsworth has been making. I know from the information we have submitted and of record to this commission that the claims of flooding and the claims they're making are simply not based in fact. And so you're being told that specific requirements were said to us. That's not the case. We've been told we need a global resolution. We don't know what that is. I have no idea what the specifics are of that. We will continue to, if we proceed to continue this, we'll continue our discussions to try to understand what it is that they think we're supposed to do to ameliorate a situation which we don't believe is being caused by the driveway that we have. So, you have to make a decision about continuing it, and you make that decision, and then we'll have to act from there.
Let's see, Attorney Ainsworth, you have a comment?
Just briefly, sir. There haven't really been discussions, and I guess the difficulty here is they take the position that there's been no harm and there's been no impact. We have experts who are presenting to the commission this evening who disagree with that. So that's a decision that has to be made. So it's not just once again, they have dictated that they believe they are correct without engaging on a substantive level. But we're here participating simply because this does affect my client's property and because avoiding the process is not a really responsible thing. But we are prepared to get into specifics. We actually have an engineer who has analyzed this and could give them specifics, but they haven't asked.
Mr. Commissioner Basserman, I guess what I'm hearing this evening is procedurally and process-wise, especially with the input from town council, it sounds like it's the appropriate thing to do, given our past practice and regulations, to move the discussion to the November meeting. That being said, it seems to me that this thing will never get resolved unless the two parties can sit down and decide what might be a compromise position.
Understood.
Does any commissioner feel differently about moving it to November and the fact that the parties need to kind of address this, because the way this is going down, it's going to come to the end of the time limit, and the likelihood of this getting approved in that condition is pretty small.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think just to clarify, the issue that we're having right now is that it is an incomplete application. That is correct, Jamie, and we cannot take an action on an incomplete application, which has been an issue in different cases before. So I think that would be following past practice. That's all.
Any other comment from Commissioner? Okay, now that the applicant has spoken, the commissioners have addressed their questions. Any member of the public want to?
Wait a minute.
Oh.
Do you want to take public comment on an incomplete application, or do you want to continue it to the November 9th meeting and take public comment at that time?
Better solution. Thank you. Okay, do we need to vote given the fact that this is a hearing to move it, Jamie?
I think the commission needs to confirm that it is continued and to the time and date and location. So it would be the November 9th meeting, which is going to be held remotely via Zoom.
So this is Commissioner Boda. I'm going to recommend that we table this item to the November 9th meeting, that staff, Jamie and Katie, seek additional guidance from town council regarding what options do we or do we not have with an incomplete application. I don't think we've ever ruled on one before because it's incomplete. So what might some options be if the two parties, if we're in the same position on November 9th at our next regularly scheduled meeting held remotely?
I'd second that motion.
And just to confirm, tabling and continuing the public hearing, correct?
Commissioner Boda, yes, that is correct.
Actually open the hearing.
Let's see, we're going to take a vote on this. Commissioner Boda?
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Begerman?
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Armrod?
Commissioner Ormrod, aye.
Commissioner Gokowski?
Commissioner Gokowski, aye.
Commissioner Steinberg?
Commissioner Steinberg, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. Okay.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I noticed during the vote that there was a hand raised by Attorney Perito.
It was not about again, Jim Perito for the applicant. It was just an inquiry about the NOV, which is on later on the agenda. Would that also be continued since they are sort of paired together?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, that would be my recommendation unless the commission feels they need to discuss it separately later.
This is Commissioner Boda. I agree that pairing the two makes sense. If we're not talking about this, it wouldn't make any sense to talk about the other. Do you want a motion for moving that item to November 9th as well now?
We don't need that, do we?
No.
I think that just a general consensus from the commission is okay.
Does anybody have a problem with moving that to the November 5th as well? Any commission? Okay, hearing silence, that moved. Next up on the agenda, we have the public hearing is closed at this point. We have applications for receipt. First one, 23-1001, 11 Laurel Hill Road, construction of a new single-family residence.
They said they heard them for the next meeting. So.
Yeah.
Real quick before we move on, are there any questions regarding the status of the item we just ended? Thought I heard a question from somebody. No? Okay. Sorry, Peter.
Anything of note on this, Jamie, before the applicant makes his comments or her comments?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. So this application is just for receipt. There was a subdivision application back in 2009, which created the subject lot that's being proposed to be developed. It's an undeveloped lot currently. I do have some reference materials available. I haven't had a lot of time to look at it yet. But one concern I have is the site plan has a planting plan for the wetland area, and I'm not really entirely sure, but it looks like the wetland area used to historically be maintained as a mowed field or lawn, and it hasn't been maintained for a while now. So I would want to see the site myself. I don't know if the commission would want to do a site walk and possibly look for some clarification on those details, which I don't know if the applicant is ready to respond to tonight. I just sent some brief comments this afternoon to them, so they haven't had much time to look at that.
Okay.
And if the applicant can let me know if they want to screen share or if they want me to screen share.
I can take care of it, Jim.
All right.
Good evening, Jim Preddy, Criscola Engineering. We prepared the plans for 11 Laurel Hill Road. Let's see, share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. This is the original subdivision plan that we actually had done back in 2008 and then was approved in 2009. I believe Jamie was correct. The existing house in the front became lot 1. A lot was cut out here, lot 2, where there was currently a house that was built. And then there was this piece that was dedicated to open space, which is now property of the town. Lot 3 had not been built on, which had this. So this whole field was mowed for hay for many years. In fact, everybody was a bit surprised at this little pocket of wetland that was discovered by the soil scientists at the time. And during that subdivision process, the approval included creating a conservation easement around this with some split rail fence and adding some plantings where there weren't any at the time. Our proposal, and so part of the approval was that this lot, when it was eventually developed, had to come back to the commission for reapproval, or at least back to staff. We are doing the same thing. The house in the same corner, a smaller footprint of a house, but with the side load garage. So we're roughly in the same place at this end. We were gonna keep the split rail fence and the plantings and everything as had been originally approved. Now, I think what Jamie is referring to is that this property hasn't been touched in all those years, and it has kind of revegetated itself. And the question is whether or not to leave that vegetation that has infilled itself or still do the plantings. Am I correct, Jamie?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. Yeah, that's one of my questions. I mean, it's probably invasive species, but I haven't been out to the site. I'm not really sure. But I think that's something that should be addressed. Also, just kind of clarifying what the limits of clearing would be on the application, because it looks like the tree line, I mean, I know it's all just shrubby stuff, but just kind of like the limits of what will be cleared versus what will remain as is. And also, while I just have the floor real quick, I did submit a copy of the site plans to the town engineering department for them to quickly review the stormwater to see if they had any comments, particularly in regards to the connections to the catch basin.
Jim Preddy again, and did they respond yet?
They have not, no.
I mean, it had gone through their office originally, and we left this exactly as was on the original site plan.
I did fill in the engineering department on that, and I provided a copy of the subdivision plan so that they can see that.
Mr. Purdy, this is Commissioner Basserman. Does it drain to the north?
Yeah, so this, you can see the contours all head in that
Yeah.
direction.
Okay.
And again, they had hayed this for many years, and there was just this little pocket of wetland soils that was discovered as, when we went across, just to verify. We actually had him out there to verify that there weren't any, and he found some. So, but
Did they do a new wetland report as part of that investigation?
no, well, I'm talking about originally.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, you feel that to make a proper assessment, a field walk would be advisable?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I definitely think on staff end, and it's up to the commission if you feel like you would want to see the site as well.
This is Commissioner Basserman again. We don't have any pictures at this point?
I have not made it out to the site yet. The application came in last week, and it's been a short week trying to get everything wrapped up for the agenda tonight.
Jim Preddy again. So
Mr. Preddy, this is Commissioner Boda. Is the wetland accessible, or at this point, or has the vegetation gotten so thick that it would be difficult to get to that section of the lot?
Jim Preddy, I'll be honest with you, I haven't tried to walk in there, but I will say that driving past here, it does look pretty thick. But it's been a while, and the vegetation is starting to change. Possibly, I'm not sure.
I drive past that lot frequently, and it does look quite
Pretty
dense.
thick. Yeah.
And I do remember it was a nice field. There was a lot of ironweed, and there was a lot of nice kind of field vegetation in there, and I think that was the commission's sort of interest in keeping it a wet meadow, as opposed to, we have a lot of forested wetlands, particularly in this area. So I would be interested in hearing the thoughts about returning it potentially to a wet meadow, and why or why not you might want to do that. The applicant might want to do that.
Jim Preddy again. So there's two questions. I mean, if we need to get a soil scientist out there again to re-examine it, then I guess I need to know that. But the other thing is, I was able to speak to the owner right before the meeting. If the commission wants to do a site walk and reevaluate whether or not to do these plantings or leave the vegetation that is filled in, he's okay with the time, the extra time to do that. Quite honestly, it ends up being easier for him if he doesn't have to clear it and plant it. So I guess it's really at their discretion where we're at this point.
Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, do you feel that since you have indicated that you haven't been out there and you want to get out there to assess the site, is that something that you think with your eyes and a camera that enough information would be available for the commission to review, or is an on-site presence something that would be better for us to have in our back pocket?
If it helps, I can meet you out there, Jamie, if the entire commission doesn't want to go.
Yeah, I could arrange something with the applicant to get out there and see it and take some pictures. The commission might want to, I'm not a professional when it comes to planting plans, so I think if the commission's looking at alternatives for the planting, or whether the planting proposed is still appropriate, that it would be best to have a wetland scientist go out and address that question, a wetland scientist or alternative landscape professional that has background specifically in wetlands. should probably just be a wetland scientist, but that would be my 2 cents.
Is Commissioner Bassman, is that something, Mr. Pretty, that the applicant would be willing to do, do you think, or you could have an issue there?
Yeah, Jim Preddy again. I was just going to say if I can arrange to meet out there with Jamie and a wetland scientist before the next meeting, I guess would that be the preferred direction for the commission?
Speaking as one commissioner, yes.
This is Commissioner Begemon. So if people went out and they decided not to do the plantings that are on the plan, is that a new revised application has to be submitted?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I think that could be revised as part of this current review process. So this is a new application for receipt. And the planting plan is from the subdivision application, which makes sense since that's what was required when the subdivision was created. However, given the amount of time that has lapsed and the change in conditions, the question is whether or not it still makes sense. And I think investigating that and getting the best answer is in the best interest of the wetland resource than just moving forward as is, because it's what was approved 10 years ago.
Fair enough. Jim Preddy again. I don't know that I can get the original wetland scientist,
Yeah.
but I'm fairly sure I can get a wetland scientist out there.
That seems fair.
Mr. Commissioner Bassman, thank you, Mr. Pretty, for that cooperation. I think that'll help move this thing along pretty good.
No problem.
Okay, next up we have the application that was voted on to be added to the agenda, 23-1002, 35 Beechwood. Jamie?
All right, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I think I met with the applicant team last week out on site. There's a lot of things they're looking to do. Kind of the focus point is replacing an old deck with pergola with a paver patio and some additional associated improvements. The deck was approved back in 2009, 2010. I do have a brief timeline that we could review if the commission thinks that would be helpful. And so we have site plans. They're not an A2 survey. So one of the questions that I'd like the commission to address is whether you feel that the site plan information is sufficient or if more information is going to be needed. And then another question that came up is kind of the wetland delineation and drainage. So let me just quickly show you a GIS map so you can kind of see what the site looks like. And I believe we have the applicant present. I can screen share the site plans, but let the applicant kind of overview what it is they're looking to do. So just to familiarize the commission real quick, this is kind of the north end of Beechwood as part of a subdivision called Beechwood Road Extension. So the house, there's an existing pool. You can kind of see the pergola structure here. The sunroom had an extension permitted back in 2018. And so they're looking to replace this pergola and a little bit of this additional adjacent area with a patio, replace the shed with a larger one, and I believe install some artificial turf in this area over here. So unless there's any questions on this, I'll pull up the site plan and let the applicant talk. Actually, before I hand it over, so here's the existing condition site plan from the applicant with the pergola and deck, existing cobbles area, and then you'll notice there's a row of arborvitae. Those were planted as part of the review of this existing pergola and deck application. And then you'll also note there's wetland location per grading and drainage plan dated 6/14/1993. That's from the subdivision map, and then there's wetland location per existing building location map approved 11/8/1993. So there is a discrepancy between essentially the subdivision map and the as-built survey of the property. Why the line changed, I don't know, whether it was a mistake or if the wetland was filled as part of the development of the lot. We do have, as part of the review from the pergola application, a document from a soil scientist where they were reviewing the potential impacts to the wetland. And they did identify in that report, let's see if I can find it real quick. It should be noted that further intrusions are already prevented by the existing chain link fence. Installation of plantings would provide an additional level of protection. Where somewhere it says that the wetland's located east of the chain link fence, which is shown here. And you can see north is kind of in the lower right corner. So it's just that the wetland's located outside of the fence based off of the soil scientist's observations in, I believe 2010. So again, questions are site plan sufficient, wetland information sufficient, and drainage. So I feel like I'm stealing the show from the applicant. But I can't see anyone. 1 minute, let me just make sure they're not trying to interject. Do we have the applicant present?
He's there. I think he's trying to
Yeah,
unmute.
he's muted.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay. I'm Dominic Saragnese with Taurus and Stone and Garden. I'm the field operations manager on behalf of Vid and Monica Bevilacqua at 35 Beechwood. You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
All
now
right,
that
so
I've kind of given a history, if you can go over what it is they're looking to do. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
so the project started with just some modest backyard improvements, redoing, overlaying their pool patio. It's a concrete pool patio, so doing some overlay over the existing area. And then kind of morphed into the structure. Pergola structure had a lot of rot and decay on it, so it turned into adding in some additional paver area and a smaller pavilion, which would be a covered roof with open sides. They also asked us to propose an outdoor grill island as well as an outdoor fireplace. And then it just kind of morphed into, hey, can we get their deck a little bigger, or excuse me, their shed a little bigger based on the setbacks. I would say the artificial turf would probably be lowest on the list, would be something that would be, if it was a major hardship for the commission, that would be the first thing that we would say would not be a necessity for this customer. So we figured we'd just try to put everything through as requested and see what the commission review would be and see what the challenges would be to make this a reality for the homeowners at 35 Beechwood. The paver area that would be additional non-permeable areas could also be permeable if need be, as there's many specs on permeable pavers, other than where they want to propose a new hot tub and any of the other fixed structures like the grill island and the fireplace. All the other additional areas could be installed as a permeable application.
And just to clarify or add, I'm not sure if you stated it, but there is a pavilion, a roofed structure going over the kitchen island or the grill island and seating area. Is that correct?
Yep. And that's
14.
the fireplace right on the side where that's an outdoor fireplace. Would be gas fired.
This is Commissioner Boda. So you mentioned that some of those non-permeable pavers they could be transitioned to permeable pavers or a different substrate. Do you have any indication, soil testing that will confirm if the soil beneath will accept that water?
At this time, we do not. So this was actually kind of, it kind of morphed into this. So the first thing we did was we reached out to the commission and zoning to see, upon our customer's request, if this is a possibility they can do in replacement of their existing wooden structure. So once we found out and changed the design, we reached out to Jamie and Jane from zoning to see if they can meet us on site, just to review the area and start this process for our homeowners on 35 Beechwood to see if this could be a reality for them.
This is Commissioner Basserman. I guess for all that is portrayed on this one page, there certainly is a lot of activity. I don't know how much other information is behind this particular sketch, but it seems to me like there ought to be a lot more information available regarding the application. The other thing is, this commission is not here to design the project.
Yep.
And it sounds like, you throw everything on here and what goes, and what doesn't go. That's really not our job. We need to get an application that we can review on the merits of that application.
I think the reason for the Dominic with Torreson here, I think the reason for this was just to see what would be reviewable and what type of information the commission would want to see us provide to see this approved for our customer.
I guess this Commissioner Basserman, my short answer is more information is needed. I know this is an application for receipt, so we're not going to spend a lot of time going over it at this point. But I think, in my mind, you guys got to decide what it is that you want the application to be, so that this commission can review it on its merits.
I think at the moment we're trying to apply for everything that's shown on the proposed drawing. I don't know if I need to work with Jamie more on as far as what would require to be provided to the commission for a proper review.
So Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So some of the things that I was looking to have the commission kind of provide further guidance on is there's no proposed stormwater management for the changes. Is that something that you're going to want to see? That's one. Two, are you satisfied with the wetland information available, or are you going to want new and or additional information regarding potential impacts of the project to the wetland reviewed by a wetland scientist? And three, whether or not, I believe these done by a landscape architect, or no, an architect?
So they're done by a designer. They're reviewed by a landscape architect that could stamp the drawings when need be.
So is that level of plan sufficient for the commission, or do you think that this activity needs to be shown on an A2 survey level site plan? These wetland lines were taken from surveys that I provided to the applicant from our files.
This is Commissioner Basserman. I think if we want to be consistent with what we've approved in the past for something of this nature, yes, we'd want an A2 survey. Yes, we'd want stormwater management. We want all the appropriate drawings that would go with a project like this. And maybe the best thing to do, Jamie, is for you to work with the applicant of saying, here's what we normally receive as a commission, and please provide.
This is Commissioner Boda. I agree. I think in particular, I would, if the applicant is not contesting the wetland lines as they were provided, I don't know that they need to be rechecked or delineated, but I am curious about how much stormwater is going to be generated potentially if this was impervious, and if the applicant is amenable to doing permeable pavers, then they would also need to provide data showing that the underlying soil will accept that water and at what rates. Because not all parts of town does the water drain into the soil or soil.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I do actually have one other question for the commission. Behind the row of arborvitae, between the row of arborvitae and the chain link fence, there is an area that is a little bit open. I think there was some past activity there that got resolved. However, it remains kind of on the open side. So I was kind of thinking, I have not talked with the applicant about it yet, but there might be some opportunity to provide some plantings in that area that would help kind of mitigate some of that increased pervious area, and provide a little bit more of a buffer to the wetland area. Is that anything that the commission feels one way or the other on, and or is there a particular professional that you would want to see involved in that plan, or just a landscape professional?
This is Commissioner Begemon. It seems like that row is right next to the line of the wetland. And if that's kind of if it's an iffy line, we might want to know that really where that line is so that we know what kind of work can be done in it and how.
So a wetland professional, just to confirm one way or the other, whether or not that is a wetland, and then also what would be the best thing to put there.
Yeah.
Commissioner Goklowski, I think because there's questionables where the lines are at this time. I think maybe they should readdress and get somebody out there and get the proper lineage so we know. I have two concerns with this. I have concerns with the AstroTurf and I have concerns with the new area for the simple fact that you're going to have a lot more activity going on in the back, and I think there's going to be more water going into the wetlands, and that's my biggest concern at this time.
Commissioner Basserman, any other commission have a comment? Is there any other information that the applicant needs to hear from the commission so that this can move forward?
Dominic with Taurus and Stone and Garden. I would just say, I think the first thing that could easily go away was just a request from the homeowner would be the artificial turf area would be something that would be easily wiped off of this request. And then, so as we talk about, we would talk about a wetland professional for additional plantings in the back. We'd be talking about a soil scientist to address the soil concerns. Is that where we'd be going with that?
Yes, Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, can you provide a written document to the homeowner so that there's no confusion on what the commission has raised as issues this evening and what needs to be pursued? The underlying soil that Commissioner Boda talked about, the delineation of the lines to make sure that we have an accurate portrayal of the site, the stormwater management, and those kinds of things, so that there's no misunderstanding the next time we get together in November of what we need to review.
I can provide it. I can shoot over an email with the items that were discussed and also attach a list of wetland scientists that the commission has seen in the recent past, just as a starting point for contact purposes. Just to clarify that list, I've got stormwater management, infiltration rates, wetland professional to assess wetland location and potential plantings. And then did the commission want the A2 survey, or is that maybe somewhat dependent upon the wetland line, or we're sure we want the survey just to make sure that everything is what we think it is, given that there's been a lot of activity on site and a lot of activity proposed? I've already heard from Chairman Basserman. I guess I'm just looking for confirmation one way or the other from the rest of the commission, make sure we're not having a one-man show.
This is Commissioner Boda. I agree. I mean, I think that the A2 has become pretty standard on applications like these, just so that we know going forward in the future when we look back to these plans, we're on a very common quantitative ground.
Commissioner Goklowski, I think an updated A2 survey is also in order here, because there are questions with the lineage and those concerns. I've always agreed to an updated A2 survey, even with my own properties.
All right, I think I've got a list that I can send over. I'll try and get that email out tomorrow. And if the applicant has any questions, they are absolutely welcome to reach out to our office and we will help you out whatever way we can.
Dominic Vittoris, and I'll just say thank you for your recommendations on this property improvement. And I'll work with Jamie, and I'll also work with our customer on this at 35 Beechwood to see if they want to move forward with the recommendations and the requirements put forth by the commission here, and see if we can get this information intact for the next meeting.
Commissioner Bassman, thanks for your participation, and good luck with the homeowner.
Thank you for your consideration. Have a good night.
As well.
All right, we're into the application for review this evening. Inland Wetland 230606, 3537 Harrison Avenue, a 6-unit townhouse and associated site improvements, which includes, I guess, the existing building containing 2 living units.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. This item has been tabled to the November 9th meeting. We have not received the revised materials requested by the commission. So they're requesting an extension to, I'm assuming, try and get those materials submitted.
Amy, this is Commissioner Boda. I'm seeing that it's 6/6 is the application date.
This is the last extension, so the November 9th meeting, a decision will have to be made, or they're gonna have to withdraw the application, or yeah.
And they are aware that by going to the November meeting, they've kind of put up
I've had a discussion with the engineering firm, so we'll see.
Because, and just like to be super clear, we just talked earlier, incomplete applications have been a reason for denial in the past. And nobody likes to do that, but we can't approve an incomplete application.
Yeah, I will continue to be in touch with the applicant to hopefully avoid that situation.
Commissioner Goklowski, when we did the site walk, it was what, 90 days ago?
Oh boy, I don't know.
No, because we were assured that we were going to get all the questions that you addressed within 2 meetings ago, and we're still waiting for it. And since I'm a new commissioner, can somebody help me out with the protocol? I mean, this is an incomplete application. We have requested information, and all we keep doing is putting it forward.
So this is Commissioner Boda. It's really incumbent upon the applicant to provide what the commission needs to make a decision. And all we can do is wait at this point. It's their application. And so if we have an incomplete application, it's really in their best interest to withdraw and resubmit, because if we deny, that they may have to go and make changes to their application that they don't necessarily want to make. So it'll really be up to them if they're not ready for the November meeting. And that's what I was just expressing to Jamie, is just to make sure that they're really aware that by pushing it all the way to the end of the number of extensions that they can have, if we're in a position where we don't have the information that we need, we cannot approve it. We can't approve an incomplete application. So again, the options are we deny it for it being incomplete, or they withdraw it and then they can resubmit without prejudice.
Commissioner Bassman, just for clarification for me and maybe for other commissioners, If it's a new application, that's a new application fee as well, correct? So
Jamie
do we-
Frederick, inland wetland agent. Yes, it's a new application, it's a new application fee. The commission has had a past practice of crediting a portion of the application fee in certain situations. So, I mean, I don't want to necessarily say that it would apply the same way necessarily, but I would certainly say if that's something the applicant wanted to request, that could be something the commission would consider. But it would have to be a request from the applicant.
Gotcha.
And they would still have to do the deep fee.
Absolutely, that could not be waived.
Mhm. Okay,
Sorry, I got one question, Commissioner Ormrod. Jamie, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right document. The follow-up comments, the questions, the more information that we're looking for, that's in the Dropbox, right? It's marked in red on the.
Mhm.
Yeah, the staff report marked up in red is the latest correspondence we've had on this application.
All right.
Well,
thank you.
beyond continuing.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, BRIW 230802 is next up, 4581 Short Rocks Road. Looks like it's tabled to next meeting. Jamie, any background on this?
Correct. Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. I did talk with Richard Shanahan, who was the primary applicant for this application. It sounds like he may be kind of walking away from the project a bit, but he may have somebody taking over. So we've tabled it to the November 9th meetings in hope that somebody can be present, do a presentation. Alternatively, they understand that they may have to withdraw and resubmit when they are ready to go forward.
Jamie, this is Commissioner Boda. I'm just curious, we had some pretty significant rain events over the last couple of months, and I'm really curious about how the work that they did do earlier this summer has held up under those rain events. So just something to share, and maybe to when they are going to come back on this one, to maybe if there's some photos or a report, that would be really helpful. Every time it rains really, really intensely, I wonder about that work.
Noted.
Next up, Inland Wetland 230803, 61 East Industrial Road. Indoor facility for athletic use. Also includes activities at 57 East Industrial Road and 21 Sycamore Way.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. We were waiting on authorization for some minor activity occurring on a neighboring property. We've received that. So I will momentarily hand it over to the applicant. I do have a staff report prepared, and I just also wanted to mention that we are up against the time clock. The commission does have to make a decision on this application or request an extension from the applicant if there is additional information you feel is necessary to make a decision.
Great. And for the applicant, we have?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jerry Panico. I'm the architect and the applicant for 61 East Industrial Road. My office is located on 62 Platt Lane in Milford, Connecticut. I'm a resident architect in the state, and I'm here we're working together with Chris Cuolo Engineering on this project. I believe we have submitted all the materials that they were requested by the agency originally. We introduced this project at about probably a month and a half ago. The activities proposed is, as described, is an indoor facility, 21,760 square feet, with is for racket sports activities, padel and pickleball courts, with lockers and all the required elements required by the codes, by the building codes. And we have two outdoor courts, and we have outdoor parking, of course. The drainage has been addressed by Jim Pretty. Here is present in the meeting. I'm not sure if I how Jamie would like to handle it. Is there something that we have to share on the screen, Jamie, or do you want to take it over?
Jim Preddy, Chris Cole Engineering. Jerry, is it okay if I share the screen and go over the site drawing?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you. As said, Chris Preddy, Chris Cole Engineering here in Branford. Let's see. So this site has been before you a number of times. Where are we? Here we are. This is, I believe this was the last approval that we had gotten. This is the site plan. It was for, at the time, they were going to combine the lots and add this building and some fuel tanks, propane tanks.
Mr. Preddy, would you mind zooming in a little bit, please? Thank you. They're just glasses. They're not magic.
I hear you. So anyway, again, this was what had been approved, retaining wall at this end of the property to try to limit some of the grading and the detention basin in this area, with the drainage, ultimately with a drainage outlet connection that connected into the existing drainage outlet on what is part of 21 Sycamore, and that's why that was mentioned before, because the drainage outlet hasn't changed, but we needed the owners of 21 Sycamore to approve the new applicants or new owners for the same activity. Let's see if I can get. So here is the new grading plan, and I'll just kind of go right to the grading plan because that's what probably is most significant here for this conversation. So one building with a couple of outdoor courts, and a drive around the building for a number of reasons, parking, fire access, etc. Still, the retaining wall in roughly the same location, the detention basin in roughly the same location. There is this corner of the 100-foot review zone that we are in over here because of this, the finger of wetlands that extends up to the existing outlet. The drainage connection in the same location. We are going a little bit above where we were before, though. All the roof drainage will be run through infiltrator galleries on both sides of the roof, split in half, both sides, with overflow connecting to the system and then into the detention basin. So we are doing a little better than the original design and trying to get more of the water back into the ground. But the same 60% impervious coverage as was part of the last application. There is, because of how this lays out, there were some other grading challenges in this corner, so there's a couple of additional retaining walls, but we kept them fairly short and benched them, so we didn't have one large monstrous retaining wall. What else do I need to add here? We did include, I have it here. We did include a landscape plan.
Mr. Peretti, before you jump, can the basin?
Yes.
Can you just zoom in again? The outfall. So it looks like is the bottom of it at 112, 114?
Yep.
And then what's the invert on the outfall pipe?
It's on the, hold on, detail sheet. So the bottom of the base is at 114. The first outlet is at 115, so this does have a wet bottom. And then there's a couple of other ports before we get to the emergency grate at the top. But we did route this all so that it passes before it gets to that grate. But in the event that all the ports are blocked, the grate can still handle the flow and not have a an overtopping of the basin. I wasn't sure what the question exactly was, but hopefully I answered it.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Mr. Preddy, is there less water leaving the site than the previous plan?
Yes, we did. So we did run the newer rainfall data from the Atlas NOAA, or the NOAA Atlas 14. We originally modified the drainage report that I had done before, but that was using the old flow. So we did rerun it with the new higher rainfall data, and we are still having a net reduction in flows. Not a lot. But we are still reducing the flow. I'm assuming you can see what I'm seeing. Again, slight reduction, but a reduction in peak flows.
Thank you.
Any other site questions? I don't know if you want Jerry to show you the building, but if there's any other site questions, I can answer it while I still got the screen.
Mr. Preddy, do you have a hydrograph for the site?
There are hydrographs in the report, yes. Do I
fish that out for us?
Hold on.
Hold on.
Actually, I have the whole thing scanned here. Hold on. Okay. What in particular, which hydrograph are you looking for?
Well, for the so that but you'll have to excuse me. I was not at the August meeting, so I'm playing a little bit of catch up.
This wasn't really discussed at the August meeting anyway, so.
Or September, if you're gonna make me say it out loud.
I don't think it was discussed then either.
So if I guess going back to the plan, so the really leaving the site. So I don't know if that basin has the bulk of the water that is leaving the site.
Yes.
So for there, I would suppose.
So you're looking for the hydrograph for I think it's this one here. This is the 100-year for the routed flows. Is that what you're, is this the
and is the red post, the blue is pre?
That's correct. So you can see that the peak has been reduced slightly.
Yeah.
And the shape generally conforms to precondition.
To being a bummer. Oh, sorry.
What?
It's so steep. But no, it's a reduction. Okay, thank you.
This Commissioner Bassman, Mr. Preddy, is this basin new to this plan?
No, it was on the plans as submitted, but it was also, I showed you, this was the plan that was previously approved, and here there's basins roughly the same size, same shape as what we have going on now.
Yeah, I see the now.
Because the coverage was is almost exactly the same.
Yeah, I got that. I just didn't see, I guess, a basin on the original plan.
Yeah, that was, again, the same spot.
Same spot?
Roughly the same position.
Oh, okay. I got you. I was looking for it next to the building, but I see things have changed in terms of the building location. Got it. Thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
This is Commissioner Begeman. With the road going all the way around the outside, in winter, the snow piling, where will that water drain? Or will there be space for snow piles? I can't tell how wide that is.
Yeah, there'll be some space in the back, and then in this front area, we can't really do much here because for a number of reasons. There's a CLMP easement and there's a 50-foot setback from this right of way. So there will be a relatively flat, wide area where they'll be able to put snow here, and which will ultimately end up draining into this basin mostly. So it's a good spot. I will say that, so a couple of things that we did have this whole storm system I had going through an oil water separator before it goes into the detention basin. One of the two comments that the town engineer had regarding the storm system was that we changed that to a hydrodynamic separator, which I've already agreed to. I changed the label, I just didn't change the shape. And then he asked for an emergency spillway, which we can manage. Although, you know, him and I did have a conversation about the grate really is the emergency spillway, and I was hesitant to add an overflow area that, you know, going down the steep bank. But I mean, that's a detail that I suppose he and I can discuss. But if it's felt like that's necessary, then I'll add it to the plans.
Any other comments from the commission? This is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, you said you had a report prepared for this one?
Yeah, before I do, Pretty, can you please just briefly share the landscape plan? Because I think I have a comment addressing that plan. It'd be helpful if they've seen it.
Oh, there you go. There's the landscape plan.
I didn't see one in the.
This there's some.
There is one, and it
seed mix called out. We have two different seed mix, one for the detention basin and one conservation mix for the other disturbed area out here.
Yes.
So this tree line was from the landscape architect thing, but it doesn't go in a straight line. It kind of meanders around behind the silt fence here. We're not proposing to cut more than past the silt fence. Just again, demarcation from the landscape architect. But then we have just some building plantings in front and various trees around the parking lot. You had a question, Jamie?
I just wanted to point out the tree line versus the silt fence, because I do have a possible condition for consideration where the site plan should be revised to show the tree line following the silt fence, just that it's clear that there won't be any clearing beyond the silt fence.
Right. Typical practice is the silt fence is the limit of construction regardless. So
yeah, just to make sure there's no misunderstandings on site. So unless commissioners have any other questions about the site plans, I can steal the screen and share the site staff report.
This is Commissioner Boda, just one. So Mr. Party, there's a reduction in peak flow. And what about total volume of water leaving the site?
So that's always an interesting question. Sorry, I'm just trying to look through the report here. And I say that's an interesting question because the way it gets discussed sometimes is sort of misleading. I mean, if you have a grass site and you paved a 10 by 10 square, you've increased the runoff volume. So now you hold that volume, and unless you have sandy soils and get it back in the ground, you could hold it forever. It has to go somewhere. So that volume is still, even though the increase still has to leave the site.
Sure. I suppose, so there is leaving the site overland flow and leaving the site infiltrated. And I guess the question is, to be more specific, is the total volume, is there an excess beyond what's being infiltrated? So in your typical storms, your typical 1-inch storms, so that should be infiltrated, right?
Agreed.
That's part of our requirement. Looking at some of those, not a very large storm, not a 50 or 100-year storm, but those 25-year storms, are we seeing a significant increase of volume?
So let's see, I'll look at the.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, while you're looking that up, I did have a brief conversation with the town engineer on this. And I think the thought was that it might be increasing slightly, but that it would be a reduction from the application that is currently approved from the site. But I'm not 100% sure on that, because that's just what I'm recalling from a verbal conversation. So I don't know if Mr. Preddy can maybe clarify off of that.
So the hydrograph, the difference in the two hydrograph volumes, say at the 5-year event, is about 8,000 cubic feet. Now, the total storage in the basin is around 7,000 cubic feet, and routed storage is 7,000 cubic feet. And that doesn't include the, where's the number? Almost 100 feet of galleys that we have on both sides of this building, that, so 200 feet of galleys that will directly take the roof drainage. And, as far as the galleys are concerned, you have to assume an infiltration rate based on the parent material. And I usually take the lower of the range and this routed with a reduction using the low range end of the range. Just because, when they did those books, they didn't dig everywhere. So like I said, I think that managing the peak flows is what's important here, and we're discharging into an established drainage outlet here, so the erosion potential is very much reduced.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I guess engineering dumb question maybe, but question: if you increase the size of the basin, do we take into account the difference between that 8,000 and 7,000 number?
So that's the thing. It's not directly relatable like that. It has to get routed through the 24 hours, and that's why. So it's an interesting question, and I think I recall Don Blue having the same conversation about hydrograph volumes versus routed hydrograph volumes.
This is Commissioner Begman. What, as a commission, we asked the applicant to manage the first 1 inch, or we don't call it that anymore, but we call it something else. But do we have requirements for total volume, et cetera, that we're talking about right now? Because if we don't, then.
Amy Frederick and the wetland agent, there is a requirement. I think it falls into the if requested category that there shouldn't be an increase in total peak flows or peak total volumes. So definitely retention and treatment of the first inch or water quality volume is high on the commission's requirements. It's always applicable. the fact that there's no increase in the peak flow is important because that can have a significant impact downstream. And then this question of no increase in peak or no increase in total volume discharge has kind of always been a sticking point. And it says that there should be no increase or demonstrated essentially why it's not prudent or feasible. So yeah, I would say that when I say it's a sticking point, it's a problem with a lot of developments, and I think for reasons that have already been mentioned by Mr. Preddy. So I don't know if the commission has additional questions on that, but I do think that there's some leeway there for the commission in their consideration. And I know that the town engineer also has some concerns with that regulation because as well intentioned as it is, it doesn't necessarily reflect reality. And also there's just so many assumptions that you're making in a calculation for that to know how accurate the number you're reviewing actually is, I think is kind of difficult. And I don't know if Reddy can correct me if I'm incorrect on that.
There is some of it that's subjective. You're making judgment calls on runoff coefficients and time of concentrations and a number of different things. I mean, we are providing, I believe we're providing the first 1 inch with the galleys and the wet bottom basin. Again, unless you hold it indefinitely, I don't know that unless the soils are all sandy material, I don't know that you can ever not increase the hydrograph volume somewhat by building a building up or paving anything.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I guess the other aspect of this that maybe is fleeting, but you know, the numbers themselves, 8,000, 7,200 in the galleys, etc., they're kind of sterile. To me, the question is, what becomes detrimental in terms of the volume increase to the surrounding land? And it may be in one case, you know, 200 is a problem, and in another case, 2,000 might be the problem.
So the increase in the hydrograph volume could be an issue on much larger developments, specifically when you're near a body of water that has that could be affected by an increase in volume, that has a water surface elevation that could be affected, or something like a stream bank that could potentially have additional erosion by the additional volume, or a pond that could get overflowed by additional volume. In this case, the numbers are so small that it would be so insignificant to any of that. And the wetland that is on the other property that this ultimately drains into is very, very large.
Just to be, as Commissioner Raz, just to be clear on that last comment, that so that the absorption capability is a large factor in your assessment here.
Yeah, it would. It's this development would have an immeasurable impact to that water surface elevation.
Okay. Jamie, were you, Commissioner Bassman, were you satisfied with, I know your issue on the plantings in the landscape?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out to the commission so that when you review my staff report, you know what it's addressing.
So maybe it's time to put that staff report up.
Right. So we've kind of already gone over a lot of the background information. The wetland's mostly off-site, and it's an old wetland delineation on file from the previous applications. Erosion control concerns were addressed. This goes over some of the stormwater stuff, which I think we've all discussed. Tree line does not allow a silt fence, we've discussed. And that goes back into the stormwater comments. So conditions for consideration, I've got some standard inspections, pre-construction, initial erosion control, pre-planting, planting, and final inspection. Prior to any site work, a copy of the easement or other mechanism acceptable to town council for the drainage connection and maintenance on 21 Sycamore Way shall be submitted to the agency, and approved by town council. The intent of this condition is to document the rights to construct the improvement and maintain it long term. And I grabbed that from previous practice and just modified it for the subject application. Prior to any work on site, any site work, the site plan shall be revised to show the proposed tree line following the silt fence location. There shall be no vegetation removal beyond the proposed silt fence location. 4, emergency overflow for stormwater basin, if provided, may be reviewed as a modification to this permit by the duly authorized agent and town engineer. It's up to the commission if you think that's appropriate. We could always strike it, and if it's something that you feel needs to come back to the commission, it could be something that has to come back to the commission. I just threw that in there based on some of the discussion with the town engineer. He was kind of on the fence about it, and wasn't requiring it. So this was kind of my way of providing an option potentially to address it if it became more relevant again. And then the last one is that everything shall be marked out properly, and an as-built submitted at the end of the project, and certification that stormwater and grading is consistent with the approval. And then the standard conditions and general provisions in the issuance of all permits.
Commissioner Basserman, does any other commissioner have comments that they wish to include in the conditions for approval staff report? Are these conditions acceptable to the applicant?
I would assume so. I guess Jerry's probably still on here, I'm hoping.
Yes.
You agree?
Yes, we agree.
Is there a motion on 230803?
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Begemon, before you make the motion, so what are we deciding about the emergency overflow? Or who decides that?
This is Commissioner Basserman. It sounds like Jamie looked at some other applications as well as in discussions with the town engineer, and given the fact that this could become an issue, included it in a condition for approval so that if something goes bump in the night, that we have an opportunity to review that.
Jamie,
is it more than that, Jamie?
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland agent, just to clarify, I wouldn't say it's more than that. I guess I'd just say it's slightly different. That's not due to past practice, but it is due to discussion with the town engineer. It kind of, I guess, more in the sense of if it becomes a concern on further review or something like that, that it wouldn't necessarily have to come back to the commission. I think if it got to the point where it was like in response to a failure, which we're assuming and hoping wouldn't happen based on the presentation, that would be a different situation where it might be a violation because then we might have erosion issues. However, so that I think is up to the commission whether or not you want to have that be a condition of approval. You could remove it, at which point it would have, or you could modify it and say it would have to come back to the commission. You could say to this permit, maybe reviewed as a modification to this permit by the inland wetland agency and town engineer, if you would feel more comfortable with that. But I would heavily defer to the town engineer's review on that particular modification. So that's why I suggested it, because I think the commission would also kind of defer to the town engineer on that kind of detail. However, there potentially could be other concerns the commission would want to look at. So it's within your right to reserve judgment.
Jim Freddy again, if it's any consolation or whatever, I'm not a fan of in this particular case of the emergency overflow, even though we've done it lots of other places, only because we're uphill of a relatively steep slope. I'd be more in favor of making the box of the outlet control structure bigger to add more grate, to have more emergency capacity, rather than trying to create a spot in the detention basin where this could overflow and then run down the hill. So I think that's why, and I've had this conversation with the town engineer. I think that's why Jamie's leaving it up to him.
Yeah, Jamie Frederick in the wetland agent. So I guess what I'm getting at is the commission could strike it, and if there ends up being a modification, it would be a modification that would then have to go through the review process, rather than trying to squeeze it into a box, if you will. I don't foresee it as being a likely problem, so it might be better to just strike it.
This Commissioner Bassman, does any commissioner feel strongly that we should retain it in this condition of approval?
This is Commissioner Begman. I don't feel strongly about that. I just would want to know, did the town engineer say that there should be a type of emergency overflow for the stormwater basin? And if so, then, and there's discussion about which would be better, then we need to change 4 to say something that if it's required by the town engineer, then the emergency flow system needs to be designed and accepted by the agency and town engineer.
Yeah, Jamie Frederick in the wetland agent. So initially the town engineer had suggested that emergency overflow be added. And my understanding is he's kind of backtracked on that based on conversations and further review of the application. Excuse me. I left this condition in there, thinking it might help address it should it become an issue again, but I think it just makes things more confusing. So at this time, I do not think the town engineer is looking for an emergency overflow. So it might just be best to strike it, and by it being silent to it, if there is a modification, then it would have to come back to the commission.
Okay, so this is Commissioner Begman. So Suzanne, when you get to your proposal, we'll delete that number 4.
Commissioner Begeman, you should make the motion. I mean, you got it. You got the mic.
No, I'm not. I'm not up for it. You go right ahead.
Are we okay with the discussion? Is everybody ready for a motion?
Yes.
Yep.
We've grilled Mr. Peretti enough for this evening. All right. So I will make a motion that we approve IW 230803 61 East Industrial Road, with including conditions as outlined in the staff report dated 10/12/23, striking item number 4 regarding the emergency overflow for stormwater basin.
I'll second that motion, Commissioner Basserman. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Steinberg?
Commissioner Steinberg, aye.
Commissioner Begeman?
Commissioner Begman, aye.
Commissioner Amrad?
Commissioner Ormrod,
aye. Can you take down the Commissioner Boda?
Commissioner Boda, aye.
And I'm not seeing anybody else. Hold on.
Commissioner Goklowski, aye.
There we are, Commissioner Goklowski. I couldn't see your face. Thank you. And Commissioner Basserman, aye.
Thank you, folks. just as an aside quickly, Peter, when you asked about the size of the detention basin, when we have these crazy rain events that seem to pop up more often, I can't help myself and I'm out driving around. And even in the worst cases, these detention basins are never more than half full. The methodology to size them is so conservative. All of them are oversized.
Great. Good engineering.
Anyway. Oh,
Thank you,
not
Mr.
saying
Chairman.
the programs are so conservative. But anyway, have a good night, folks.
Thank you,
Thank you.
commissioners. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Inland Wetland 230901, 329 East Main, aka 325 East Main Street, mixed-use residential development.
Jamie Frederick, in the Wetland Agent. I've heard from the applicant. They had discussions with neighbors, I think primarily in response to a variance application they have submitted as well. But just in general, regarding the project, they are revising the plans in response to those conversations. So, in the interest of saving time, those plans will be ready for the November 9th meeting, and they will hold off on giving any presentation until that time. It's my understanding that they're going to be increasing the footprint of the building a little bit, and making some other associated site adjustments, but that it will still be an overall reduction in impervious area from the current site condition.
Amy, this is Commissioner Boda. 329 East Main, is that the movie theater site?
It is.
And so I know that when it comes to some of these larger sites, we do rely on peer review when there is extensive engineering and stormwater issues, so that we don't miss something, because it is a lay commission. And I'm wondering, not having looked yet at the materials for that, if this is a particular instance where the commission would need to seek peer review.
Jamie Frederick, in the Wetland Agent. So they are revising the stormwater to account for the adjustment to the parking lot and building layout, but they're for the most part looking to use the existing stormwater system with modifications in how it's routed to accommodate for those changes in where the impervious areas are. And our town engineer has reviewed the application, and I expect him to review the revised application materials that are submitted. If the commission thinks a peer review beyond what the town engineering office can provide is needed, then I think that's something that we want to try and move forward with sooner rather than later. But
that's why
I'm a bit hesitant to discuss it too much without the applicant present.
That's fair. Commissioner Boda, I think that's why I brought it up to, with these larger sites that has been a past practice. I guess maybe two is there an increased footprint beyond an increased impervious footprint beyond what currently exists?
The activity all is proposed within the existing footprint of disturbance.
Okay. I don't know. So I will just put that to the commission that again, not having heard anything. I just know that the process, having a new commission rather, the process for obtaining peer review is a lengthy process. And it also means that we need to give an estimate to the applicant. The applicant pays for the peer review. The peer reviewer does not report to the applicant. They report to the commission. And it just, because this is a lay commission, it provides us with the expertise that we need in particularly complicated engineering applications. So because it's we have to put out a request for a proposal from multiple engineering firms, I thought I would mention it now.
Jamie Frederick, in the Wetland Agent. I will just make a couple other brief comments, and I did ask the town engineer if he thought it would be an appropriate application for a peer review, kind of based off of the fact that it's a larger site. He's usually not shy about saying yes if he thinks it is, and I did not receive that advice. I also do have some stormwater questions out to the applicant, which I know they're looking to address along with the revised materials. So all of that correspondence and the current site plans, which as we know are going to be modified, are in the Dropbox if the commissioners want to take a look at it.
Okay. And then I guess just one more question. So they're not, so since it's all within the existing footprint, it is a safe assumption that they're not proposing any fill.
To clarify, you mean fill of wetland or fill like in general?
Fill,
yeah, there's no proposed direct wetland impact.
Okay. That's helpful.
As far as grading, I'm sure there's some spots that are being elevated slightly.
And again, Commissioner Boda, for just for context, that would be another trigger is when there is significant impact, i.e. or e.g. Wetland fill that's being proposed. That is another reason for us to secure peer review. So this, I mean, because it's on, it's staying in the existing footprint, because they're not proposing filling of a wetland, and then third with the town engineer thinking that it would be appropriate for us to use the town engineer as peer review, or just guidance rather, that we can handle it in-house. Thank you, Jamie. It's helpful.
Good question.
Commissioner Begemon, I haven't looked carefully through all of this, but I've walked around that parking lot once because I had to kill some time. And in my memory, the water does sheet flow off the pavement right into the edge of the wetland, like where the on-ramp goes. Is that, I remember walking around there saying, boy, there are no storm drains or
or they're in the wetland agent. I was just out there the other day. I did take some photos, so I'll throw them in the Dropbox. It is curbed. There are catch basins. This is the one site in town that we have received annual maintenance reports for. So I know that the catch basins and the hydrodynamic separators have been maintained routinely on an annual basis. So yeah, there is stormwater improvements on site. They're going to be modified. Asked a couple of additional comments on clarifying routing and such, and also just kind of relative to some of the stormwater management regulations we were discussing earlier about volumes and retention. Site previously didn't have retention, and they're not proposing to add retention. So I wanted them to address that. So beyond that, I think we should hold off on any further discussion until the applicant can be present, but we should expect some new plans in a presentation at the November 9th meeting.
Great. Thanks.
All right. This is Commissioner Bassman. Moving to enforcement. We have 38 Howard Avenue, notice of violation, retaining wall and associated activities, and we've got a couple discussions about this. Jamie, can you provide an update, please?
So that one we discussed earlier would be continued to the November 9th meeting.
Enough said.
Yep.
Cease and correct 22-1201, 21 Branford Road, construction without permits, and I guess CC 230901, 21 Branford Road, same thing, construction without permits. Continuation of the just cause hearing. Do we have the applicant online here?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. The owner is not present. I know that he has difficulty joining the Zoom meetings, and English is not his first language. So I surprisingly did hear from him yesterday. I was informed the silt fence was installed and that I could come out to inspect. So I went out yesterday afternoon. And I inspected the silt fence and had a brief conversation with the property owner. The silt fence is about 95% installed. Unfortunately, I don't know if commissioners remember, there is a excavated hole where there was some water, and there's like a leak off from that, kind of trenched in towards the back of the property line towards the wetland area. So that hole is still there along with that trench. So where that little trench is has not been towed in. I told him he needs to have that water pumped out and fill in the hole in the associated trench and backfill the silt fence in that spot. He indicated that he would get that done. I know that East Shore District Health is also looking to have that done, and they want it to be pumped out by a licensed hauler, just to make sure that if there's anything in that water, it's being properly taken care of. I also discussed with the property owner about arranging a meeting with at least Inland Wetlands and Planning and Zoning, along with himself and his design professionals, namely Waldo Associates, being his engineering firm, to discuss what would be involved in applications and or alternative plans. I told him, if it would be helpful, we can look into having an interpreter present. And I also suggested that if he has an attorney, that his attorney should attend. So he seemed like he was willing to try and schedule something. So I'm planning on following up with him, CCing his Waldo Associates on that email, so that way they kind of know what the status is and what's going on, and trying to schedule something prior to the November 9th meeting so that we can have more of an update for the commission. There is also a court case involving this property right now, with a hearing on the 30th, I believe. So I think it would be good to see what comes of that before the commission makes any decisions. So I guess my guidance to the commission would be to continue these items to the November 9th meeting. And hopefully I'll have some additional updates for you at that point. As stated at the special meeting last week, if you continue review of the second cease and correct order, which has not been upheld yet, it is in effect until you make a decision. So it doesn't jeopardize the effectiveness of the order. It's still in effect. It's still it's still an order. So there's no harm in waiting. I did also send a couple of questions over to town council in response to the meeting last week, but I have not gotten a response back yet. So I could potentially have responses to those for the November 9th meeting as well. And when I was out there, I didn't see any obvious new activity, with maybe the exception of some gardening pots, but that's not really.
Commissioner Goklowski, Jamie, do you feel that the property owner got the message?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I think he, I think he's I'm optimistic that we can get a meeting scheduled and discuss next steps. I don't think he fully understands how much she's got ahead of him, but I think he's realizing it's something he's going to have to face.
So he kind of understands the severity of the situation at this time.
Yeah, he understands that he's been fined and that additional fines could be levied. So.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, you mentioned specifically, the second CC. Any time issues with the first CC?
So, I mean, the deadlines outlined in the first cease and correct order have expired, which is excuse me, part of the reason why the commission decided to move forward with issuing fines. At this point, kind of the only other mechanism the commission has regarding the first cease and correct order, because it's been filed on the land records, associated fines have been issued, would be to bring the, I mean, I guess we could issue another letter with a new date, but that's not really going to get us anywhere,
Right.
would be to bring it to court. So I think what makes sense in the interim is, since I have established contact with the property owner again, is to discuss a process, find out what his intentions are, what a reasonable timeline might be, and see if we can get a resolution to the activity.
Okay, anybody have issue with the plan to just move this into the November meeting?
Commissioner Goklowski, no, I think we should move it to the November meeting.
Let's hope that Jamie is successful in bringing the parties together and we get a plan of action. All right, we have other business. 434 East Main Street, request to reduce the bond amount on file number inland wetland 200701. Jamie, you got the floor.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So there's been a couple of requests over the past year or so to consider reducing the bond for this site. It's an ongoing site. Site work started. There's kind of a main pad that has been constructed, and it's in a kind of temporary holding pattern, for lack of better descriptors, this late in the evening. So the commission had requested previously that in order to consider this request, since it's not in its final state of stabilization, they would want input from the project engineer and or soil and erosion control professional, itemization as to, or identification as to what the current erosion control needs are on site, and kind of indication as to what the relatable erosion control bond needs would be. So at this point, there has been a request to reduce the bond, in relation to the erosion controls, and also in relation to, there's a 5-year monitoring requirement. So there's the planting bond and the monitoring bond. So I did prepare a brief memo for the commission to look at, and we do have the material submitted by the applicant or permit holder. And what else do I want to say? My memo was prepared before I saw this year's erosion or this year's monitoring report. So I did just receive a monitoring report this week for 2023 growing season. Prior to that, we only had one monitoring report for year one, which did not identify the percent survival of the plantings. This year's indicates that the 85% survival is well exceeded. So I just open up a couple of things that hopefully I can cruise through this. So I'm going to share a couple of things, and I'm going to hand it over to the permit holder to kind of share whatever he wants to share on behalf of his request. But I just closed the meeting. Okay, so has everyone seen the site plan?
Yep.
Okay, so what you're seeing is East Main Street. We've got the railroad here, Branford River in the back. Cafe Fiore is approximately in this location here. And then Planet Fitness is across the street after you go under the bridge. So a lot of the site is covered in crushed stone and or vegetation. The retaining wall you can see along the edge of the proposed development has been constructed. There's a diversion swale that directs stormwater to either temporary sediment trap. The catch basins have been installed. They're slightly elevated and they're surrounded by crushed stone and inlet protection. The down here you'll see a kind of some bubbles with LOD. These are the upland review planting areas, which are the monitor areas being monitored and that were planted. In recent inspections, I would say generally speaking, everything has looked really good. The primary area of concern has been this temporary sediment trap over here. Whenever I've contacted the applicant about fixing it, they've done so in a timely manner. But there have been times where this has gotten a little bit overloaded and the silt fence has needed repair to prevent overtopping and impact to the wetland area. So that I would say would be my biggest long-term or current condition erosion concern. A couple photos taken by BL companies during their site visit with the owner to look at the erosion control needs. You can see they have more than just an anti-tracking pad, basically the entire site, with the exception of the planting areas, which you're looking at here. So this is one of the planting areas, and you can see the silt fence. It's not really needed in this position at this time. Here's one of the inlets. You can see it's surrounded by crushed stone, and there is inlet protection, and there's cones on all of the catch basins to, I think, help prevent any traffic going over them and help with maintenance and monitoring. This is the level spreader at the outlet of the main temporary sediment trap. The Branford River is off to the right. You can see that this area has vegetated back in pretty well. Again, this is one of the planting areas, which is adjacent to upland/wetland areas. This is the outlet from the temporary sediment trap, and this right here is my primary erosion concern from this for the site. But this has been repaired and replaced as needed, and sometimes there's some stone up above that needs to get fixed as well. The last repair was pretty significant though, so it should hold for a while. So does the commission want to review my memo or hear from the permit holder?
This is Commissioner Bassman. Just a background question, I guess, JB. When the bond was established, were there specific amounts between the erosion controls and the planting monitoring?
Yes, there were. And no, there weren't. So generally speaking, the applicant has to submit an itemized estimate for a bond, and then staff reviews it, and hopefully the two align and we're all in agreement. Sometimes I end up bringing it to the commission because we're not in agreement. That was the case for this application, and the commission decided to compromise somewhere in the middle. So we kind of have numbers for each section. So here we've got erosion and sediment controls. Applicant provided $29,692.20. Town estimate was $38,997.92. Applicant or permit holder has proposed that based on the amount, the compromise, that this be considered $32,692.20. And for the plantings and seeding, it's $9,968 was applicant, $10,353 was staff, So based on the estimate, and the remainder, it'd be $11,107.80 for the planting material. And then for monitoring reports, it would stick with the 1,200. So, I mean, I do think it's a little odd that this number ends up being more than the town. So, I mean, I guess I'd probably say stick with the town estimate here, especially since they're not that far off, and apply all the rest to erosion controls if it gets to that. Let's see. The request was for the bond to be reduced to 5,000. So it's not really itemized per se. But there is a bit of rationale for the property is mostly comprised of compacted stone and gravel, allowing great infiltration of stormwater. The erosion control devices have all been installed and are functioning properly. Vegetation has further grown since earthwork operations ceased and have now stabilized the perimeter of the site, particularly downslope of the retaining wall. This is all great based on the rainy spring, summer, and fall we've had this year. BL companies formally requested a bond reduction to 5,000. Landowner is doing quarterly inspections on site and maintaining existing erosion control devices as necessary based on those inspections.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Do you get those quarterly inspection reports?
I do not, no.
Commissioner Goklowski, do you feel that the property owner or the applicant are working with the town or doing what they're supposed to do to maintain the proper controls for the inland wetlands area?
Jamie Frederick in the wetland agent. I would say yes, but unfortunately that's not really a reason to grant a reduction of the bond. Okay. If the commission's granting a reduction of the bond, it should really be tied to the reduction in need for the bond, which I do think there's room for argument in this particular case. And I think that an argument has been presented. I just think it's important that when the commission considers that request, it's considered in light of site conditions and site needs rather than how well the property owner maintains the property.
This is Commissioner Boda. Can we jump over to your memo? Because I think that in looking at it, I think that kind of gets at the rationale we would need to consider. Because I don't remember returning a bond while the project was still underway, because the bond serves a purpose. And while this application, was it from 2020?
2020, I believe.
So it's in a holding pattern, but when the work, assuming that the work recommences, then, are we putting the bond back into place? So maybe, Jamie, I think that you outlined the issues, so perhaps we can go over that, and then the commission can have a conversation with those factors in mind.
Okay. So yeah, I think the first paragraph just kind of outlines what you were just discussing, with this being a unique request and that the site's not fully completed. It's not compliant with the site plan. However, which is typically the requirement for reducing the bond. That being said, the commission has had previous discussions with the permit holder about type of information that would be needed to consider such a request. Information included input from project engineer / erosion control professional, revised site plan identifying the current erosion control needs for the site, and itemization for the current erosion control needs. Information has been submitted with the exception of the itemization of the current erosion controls. Request is for the bond to be reduced to $5,000, with the owner / permit holder conducting quarterly inspections of the erosion controls and making routine repairs. I recommend that should the commission decide to reduce the bond, the following are considered. Is this a permanent or temporary bond reduction? If temporary, it should be made clear that this reduced erosion control bond is accepted only while the site is being maintained in its current condition. No additional construction, grading, or stockpiling shall occur without the review of the commission and consideration as to whether the bond amount needs to be readjusted based on the activities to be conducted. Also consider whether quarterly inspections are sufficient, possibly increased to monthly or quarterly with additional inspections to occur if rain event has greater than X rainfall. Not in my memo, but to tail off of what was mentioned previously, the commission could also require that some sort of correspondence outlining the result of those inspections be emailed to the inland wetland office. Whether there should be a reduction of the planting and or monitoring bond amounts. There is no past practice that I am aware of for reducing these bonds prior to the end of monitoring period. To date, only one monitoring report has been received. That's incorrect. We've received two. The first report did not confirm whether the 85% survival criteria was met. And I did not get clarification on that. However, we have received the second monitoring report, which is dated October 5th. And it states that the plant numbers greatly exceed the 85 survival threshold and that there's good volunteer vegetation growth in the areas. So overall, the amount of cash versus surety. Oh, and then also whether to reduce cash versus surety. So the bond is 45,000. I think it's 45,500. I think that was a typo. No, it is 45,000. So half of the 45,000 is surety and half of it is cash. So I'm sure the applicant is probably predominantly looking for the cash bond to be returned. I mean, that would be the situation I would probably find myself in. So I'm inserting myself. But anyways, I'm rambling. But the commission needs to decide what liability and what type of bond they believe is necessary to retain.
Commissioner, a question. Where did the $5,000 number come from?
434.
As far as I'm aware, it came from an email correspondence that I received from BL companies. This email.
But what does the 5,000 represent?
So that's why in my memo I stated that there isn't itemization. I'm not sure. I think it represents essentially what BL companies thought was reflective of needs for maintenance of the existing erosion controls installed on site.
Exactly.
So just this is Commissioner voted two cents. One, I don't think that we've returned bonds for planting plan until the monitoring period is over. That's been our, as far as I can remember, that is our practice. That's the purpose of the planting plan bond, is to ensure that through the application, the completion of the application, the monitoring, in the event that things do not go according to plan, the commission has the ability to go in and do the repair. As far as the sediment and erosion control, the site is stable, and I think that if the site is not being worked on, I could see returning some of that bond, but only while the site is not being worked on. I think that kind of going back to this memo, it would make sense to put something into a whether it's a motion or however we do this, that those bonds need to be returned once the site is an active construction site again. That was part of the permit, and so that's currently my thinking. And I don't understand where the 5,000 But I don't know that that would be the number that we would land at, because I think that the planting bond should stay through the monitoring period.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Just to be clear, I guess, Commissioner Boda, when you said returned, in other words, when the site gets active, we would consider this a temporary bond reduction. When the site gets active, it should go back to a different number, maybe the same, maybe a different number once the site has got construction activity associated with it. Is that my understanding of what you're proposing here?
This is Commissioner Boda. Yes, I think that once the site is back under construction, then those sediment and erosion control bond would need to go back, need to be reactivated, as it were.
Can I make a comment on that? I would agree that it would be reevaluated because the erosion control items that have been originally proposed are all installed and being successfully undertaken. Not to say that when we reactivate the site that there's going to be more activity there and maybe possibly of a different nature. And so I do believe that the erosion controls at that time by the engineer should be reevaluated, not necessarily exactly as they now exist, because what's existing is stable and it's working. And but a reconstruction, depending on the ultimate use of that site, could alter that. So certainly it should be reevaluated.
Thank you. So again, Commissioner Boda, I wonder, is that something, and I'm asking Jamie, is that something that we would be able to do? And when I say that, I mean kind of redetermining what the sediment and erosion control bond would be for and the quantities. Is that something that we could do outside of a request for revision? Existing permit?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. So I mean, I guess that's kind of what you're being requested to do right now, is to kind of approve a phasing plan, if you will, of a holding pattern for the time being to reduce the bond for that period. And then, yeah, I think it would be a modification to the permit in a sense, but depending on the scope of change would depend on whether it would be a modification or a new permit. It probably would fall, assuming it's within the same footprint and there's no significant difference in impervious surface and drainage layout, it probably could be a modification. But without having any plans, can't say with 100% certainty. We kind of have an informal process as far as permit modifications go. There is no fee associated with permit modification. And I think that was done to kind of keep an open door policy and make sure that permit holders were coming to the commission rather than asking for forgiveness. So, I mean, I definitely think it's a possible process, and I think it makes sense. I just would want to point out that the bond amount is for the erosion controls needed. So if there's a reduction in the erosion control need, then there could be a reduction in the associated bond. But it's not just for new installation, it's for installation and maintenance. So it's possible that certain parts of the site will be fully vegetated and not need erosion controls anymore, at which point, of course, it doesn't necessarily make sense. It doesn't make sense to have that bond in place, but that a plan identifying that would need to be submitted for review by the commission to accompany that request for the revised bond amount. So basically, if the commission were to grant a temporary reduction in the bond relative to erosion controls, prior to starting work back up, the applicant or permit holder would need to submit either the bond as originally approved or a modified plan for the commission to review with modified quantities for erosion controls and a modified estimate for consideration.
Commissioner Goklowski, is it my understanding that the permit holder has done everything that the commission has originally asked when they were looking to develop this site? And if so, do you think the extent of the dollar amount of the bond is necessary at this time? Because the initial dollar amount was for the original setup of this property to maintain the inland wetlands. Why should we hold on to monies that are not going to be needed to do this project at this time? That's my question.
I think that's why the commission's discussing that right now.
I think it's a no-brainer. Then there should be some type of modification or reduction on this particular bond, since the site is already, I mean, everybody drives by that site every day. I mean, we know what's there. It's been maintained, from what I can see, fairly well.
Commissioner Steinberg, I agree with Commissioner Goklowski, and it seems to be somewhat of a common sense thing, but I'm not sure how to figure out the numbers.
So Jamie Frederick, and the wetland agent, as we've identified, there's 3 sections, and I think it's pretty clear. I think a lot of commissioners are identifying from an erosion control standpoint based on the current site conditions.
Yeah, looks like that's complete.
I think it's pretty stable, relatively speaking, right now. As I've identified, there is that one area that has repetitively been an issue that has been responded to, but it's been an issue that's had to be responded to and could, especially if it's only being inspected quarterly, become a problem. So, I mean, it's not completely irrelevant. So I do think retaining something makes sense. And I certainly think that the commission wants to retain an interest in at least reassessing the situation when work is about to restart, to make sure that the scope of work is covered by the bond that's on hand. Because once they go in to start doing the rest of the site work, there'll be additional site grading, re-exposed bare soil, depending on how long it takes. Silt fence only lasts for so long. So, I mean, there's certainly still interest in erosion controls on the site. And then in regards to the plantings and monitoring, I'm not sure how much discussion has been had with the commission about reducing bonds early. I cannot think of any cases where the bond has been reduced early for these kinds of situations. However, I think there has been I know I've had some discussion with applicants, and I'm not sure how much of it's made it to the commission. I don't know that it makes sense this early. I've suggested to applicants, look, I don't know of any past practice, but if after 3 years you've submitted all of your monitoring reports on time, they've all been successful, then it's possible the commission might consider a reduction, because at that point, the likelihood of needing to replant everything is pretty low. That being said, we're only in year 2 of monitoring, but the monitoring report is suggesting that it's pretty successful. It does identify some actions for the owner to take to ensure that the plantings are able to thrive and not be outcompeted by surrounding vegetation. We only received 1 monitoring report for what I'll call year 1, whereas we're supposed to receive a 6-month and 1 year. So, I mean, I would just I guess my advice to the commission regarding any reduction of the planting and or monitoring reports would be that you're gonna be setting precedents. So, and again, reducing the bond amount has nothing to do, unfortunately, with how well an individual is maintaining their particular site. It has to do with the original permit condition and the need to ensure that that activity is completed with who is completing that work, not part of the picture.
The application that was granted a permit, that has not been completed. So I think that's the underlying issue, which is we're talking about returning a bond for a permit that has been started but not completed. And I think one of our most intentional moves is to be fair and uniform with our application of the rules and the regulations set forward both by the town, our town regs, as well as the state. Looking at these bond amounts, it looks like the sediment and erosion control, am I reading correctly? That's 32. So their dollar amount was the 32,692.20.
The 32,692.20 is what they were proposing be the compromise between the two figures based on the total bond being 45,000.
Okay, and so then the planting plan and the monitoring were 11,500-ish.
The monitoring was 1,200.
Yeah. So the total of the planting and the monitoring is 11,553. Is that accurate?
Are you using
I'm using the for the planting plan, the 10,353, and for the monitoring 1,200.
All right, and you got 11,553?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I got as well.
So what was the total original amount of the bond? Was 45? Was it 45?
Yes.
This is Commissioner Begamon. You're talking about planting right now, but what I'm thinking about is that it's Jamie who is finding the problem in the corner of the lot with erosion. It's not the property owner who is finding it and fixing it. And I feel like, why would we give anything back if the property owner fixes that situation and then comes back to us and says, everything is totally taken care of now, that would be the time to consider giving some of the bond for erosion control stuff back, not now.
To clarify, the problems I have identified have been addressed and are resolved.
And the problem was not the situation that was corrected was not a violation. It was not an overflow. It was a buildup of sediment on the in the area. And as a result, we removed, and it did not overflow into the area of into the buffer area, certainly not into the wetlands area. It was building up, yes. We removed all that sediment. We installed modified riprap up and down through the detention area, up into the swale. I mean, we kind of overextended ourselves to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't a case of a violation or a breach. It was close. There's no question. but it did not breach, and we took care of it in time, in a timely way, and we I believe we did really a good job of making sure that this does not happen again. So it has been dealt with.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. So yeah, it has been a repetitive problem in the same area. And I do feel like the last fix was much more significant to reduce future problems. I do still think that the silt fence at the bottom has a lot of flow going through it. So that's why in my memo, I suggested potentially having more routine inspections just to make sure that there's no issues.
This Commissioner Basserman, I guess at this point, let me put a straw proposal out there. Given the fact that we're only in the early stages, if you will, of the planting bond period, etc., I suggest we retain the planting bond intact until sufficient demonstration regarding survivability is achieved. Regarding the erosion controls, I think either 5,000 or 10,000 should be retained and the rest returned to the permit holder. That 5,000 to 10,000 hopefully will take care of fixes until the site is active under construction activity, in which case the bond for the erosion controls will be reevaluated on the basis of the plan that is proposed. And regarding the monitoring reports, that the Inland Wetland Office receive any and all monitoring reports regarding soil erosion during the period of time that the bond is in place.
That sounded like a motion to me.
Sounded like what?
That sounded like a motion to me.
I second that emotion.
Katie, did you catch that?
I gotta make it a motion first. Wait a minute.
I would agree. I think I would agree with how you listed it out. I think holding back. So if we held back 5,000, hold on, 5 or 10.
5 of 32.
Yeah, I guess it really gets down to, I don't know, how much do you spend on fixing the erosion controls to the extent that there's a break? And I have no feel for what 5,000 gives you versus 10,000.
Well,
to give you an idea, if we put a crew out there for a day with equipment, that's $2,000. Okay, so and that's what it took, for instance, to do that one restoration that we did do. It took a better part of a day, and with some equipment. So that just gives you an idea of what a repair would take. Maintenance, on the other hand, if you're just doing some silt fence corrections and that sort of thing, it's much less.
So I think given that we see the permit holder, they're responsive, and that we're not having to use the bond at this point. So if we held 5,000, that would return strictly from the sediment and erosion control bond. That would return 28,447. And from that, if we split it 50-50 with cash and a surety, that would put 14,223 cash, 14,223 a surety back. And I would agree that we hold that in the planting and the monitoring bond in its entirety.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a motion that's happening right now. You want me to turn it into a
I
motion?
think you gotta
Just
announce when
copying.
you're making a motion so that we get
Yeah.
it. on the record.
I got it. So.
All right. I'm just copying Commissioner Chairman Basserman's trying to reiterate, restate. And I think the other component was that once construction is going to recommence, that the permit holder must come back with a revised plan for either for their sediment erosion control, including dollar amounts for a bond for all of that work.
And this is Commissioner Begemon. In terms of not setting a precedent, what happens when somebody comes in and their building process gets stalled for 6 months and they ask for a bond reduction? I mean, we have to say somewhere in here that if it is extenuating circumstances, why we're doing it for this project.
1 minute. Commissioner Begemon, you have really good points, but can we get a second and then have discussion?
Well, I didn't think it was a motion.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was. Sorry. Okay. Sorry to have interrupted you.
That's okay.
Please continue.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think it's a fair concern. And I think that was sort of to the question of like trying to be fair and uniform. And there is a tension between fairness and uniformity. And so it's through the careful deliberation of the specific facts on the ground. And this is Mr. Giordano has been before us multiple times. And the site has essentially the site work has stopped. And we've gone and asked him to bring us additional information about, in this case, why would we return the sediment and erosion control? So I think it's not on a whim, and it's not without additional fact finding. And I think that separates it from someone who comes, because people are we are always going to have property owners wanting their bonds back. And I think in this particular case, we know that the site is stable. We know that there's not additional work happening on it. We don't know when the work is going to recommence. And we're also putting into effect that when it does, the permit holder has to come back with a modification for those sediment and erosion controls, and they'll need to resubmit the bond, whatever bond is necessary for those erosion controls.
And this is Commissioner Bassman. And to the extent that some other applicant or permit holder has the same kind of conditions in terms of stability and cooperation and kinds of things, why wouldn't we return, as we have talking about here, a portion of the erosion and control bond for that individual as well? But again, the key is all of the criteria that went into getting us to this point would have to be the same.
Right.
I think I agree. This is Commissioner Boda. I agree that is the underlying question. Why this property owner? Why now? And again, like Jamie underscored, it has to be specific to the permit. It cannot be specific to the person who is asking and their demeanor. I mean, Mr. Giordano, you're lovely, but that should not be a factor for consideration. Do you know what I mean? Like, that can't be part of the why.
So are we at a point for a motion?
You got this in a second.
So this is Commissioner Boda. Do I need to re-say all of the things, or Katie, where are we at with what you've captured?
So I currently have that
We're gonna hold $5,000 and return from the sediment and erosion controls 28,447. 14,223 is cash bond, 14,223 is surety, and then the planting and monitoring bonds are retained fully. Once construction recommences, the permit holder must come back with a revised plan and bond estimate for work that needs to be completed.
Just one correction, I would say prior to re-engaging in site work.
Got it.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I thought there was a third component, which was the monitoring reports.
Oh, yes.
Needed to be sent to the inland wetland office.
I accept Chairman Basserman's friendly amendment.
Which monitoring reports, of the plantings or the erosion controls?
Both.
Okay.
But I think Jamie indicated she just got year 2 of the planting, but that the reports that are done kind of internally regarding the erosion controls, that those be sent to the inland wetland office.
Got it. Is that it?
I think Commissioner Boda, did Katie capture that all for you?
Yeah, we need a second though.
Right.
Commissioner Goklowski, second.
Any further discussion? All right, let's take a vote. Commissioner Omrod.
Commissioner Ormrod, aye.
Commissioner Steinberg.
Commissioner Steinberg, aye.
Commissioner Boda.
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Goklowski.
Commissioner Goklowski, aye.
Commissioner Begeman.
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye.
That was the messiest motion I think I've ever seen.
Believe it or not, it is not.
Well, I'd like to thank the commission for the consideration and the action. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, Jamie, do we need to go into any of these agent approvals?
If any of the commissioners have any questions, you can let me know now or contact our office. More than happy to discuss.
Okay, moving on to correspondence and announcements.
2024 annual meeting schedule. So I've got to do my annual pitch and you guys make your decision. Not that I want to meet twice a year, but I think we should consider whether we keep meeting once a month or twice a month, not twice a year. Twice a year would be fantastic. All right, so Katie drafted up 2 meeting schedules. They're both in the Dropbox. The benefit of meeting twice a month is that applications can only be for receipt at a regularly scheduled meeting, so it can kind of help with timelines. Theoretically, the commission could have a standing practice of canceling the second meeting unless there's something that the commission really felt needed to be discussed. I'm pretty sure Commissioner Boda can speak to the real life experience of how that works. So it's out there. If you want more information from me, I'll dive into more. But is there any feedback on meeting once or twice a month? We have had a lot more on the agenda. However, the catch-22 of meeting twice a month is inevitably things always fill the space. So.
If we did meet twice a month, would there be an ability to say that the meeting ends by a certain time or not? Because I think part of the reason to have 2 a month is because I know like Melissa Funaro is not here today, but it gets really late sometimes, and when it gets really late, that makes it hard, and then people don't want to serve. I'm not saying that she doesn't, but that can happen, right? So if we go to twice a month, I would think it would be a good idea if we could say that the meetings are from 7 to 9 or something. Yep. I know that I think we've been reluctant to end any of these meetings because of trying to get through the materials. So
yeah, unfortunately, the volume of material is the volume of material, and somehow it's got to get gone through. I don't think you can put a time limit on when the meeting ends, because that's not going to be fair to the people at the end of the agenda that don't get discussed at all. I think possibly, so there's a couple different things the commission could look at. We could have staff look at and prepare for next meeting. We could give you more information, but you could have like one meeting primarily for applications for another meeting primarily for enforcement, with the exception of when a cease and correct order requires that, whenever there's like an action that requires more immediate action. So that way you're at least reducing the amount of items on the agenda, which could potentially help. And, you know, if there's less items on the agenda, it might be a bit easier to keep things moving and not get stuck on things. And another thing the commission could do, and this is kind of separate from our schedule, but another thing the commission could do to try and shorten the meeting length is you could stop hearing applications for receipt when they're for receipt. You could just have them be for receipt and you'll discuss them at your next meeting. If you're going to do that, I do think it is nice to have the 2 meetings, so that way people aren't waiting a whole month to be able to get before you to find out if they need to submit additional information, because then that puts the time clock kind of tight. But it could potentially reduce the amount of times you're talking about an application, because if you get an application and it has everything you need in it and it was for receipt and now it's actionable when you're first talking about it, you can make a decision. It doesn't have to go to another meeting. You don't have to get the recap of what it was about. There are commissions that have that practice. I think that if you want to do that practice, it should be a decision the commission makes, so that way we can start relaying it to applicants and they can be aware of it. That's one thought.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Is there any advantage to once a quarter having 2 meetings in a month and a quarter? Every other month would be a single meeting. So January, single meeting, February, single meeting, March, 2. And we could adjust. It doesn't have to be at the end of the quarter, but I'm saying 4 times a year we'd have a double meeting month.
It would help with a couple of applications catching that receipt date. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I mean, alternatively, we could just keep meeting once a month and having special meetings. But the problem with special meetings is making sure everyone's available. And also, you can't receive an application at a special meeting. So it doesn't help out applicants with the timeline process.
We have to make this decision by when?
I believe we have to have the schedule filed 35 days prior to our first meeting in 2024. So we could table this, let people kind of think about it, digest it, and make a decision at the November meeting.
The November meeting is starting to feel very heavy. For the record. And
are you proposing
the
2 meetings a month?
What was that?
Are you proposing 2 meetings a month?
I'm halfway through this meeting. It seemed like November should be a 2 meeting month, because all of those items that got tabled.
Yeah.
And all of the items that are for review, they're all for review. And that's a lot. And that's so I think that there's, you know, listen, I've lived through 2 meetings a month, and we're back here. So it didn't work out the way that we were hoping that it would, but it also, things sort of slowed down in terms of the number of applications that we were receiving. So, but I'm interested in what Chairman Basserman suggested with sort of an every other, so that might enable us to kind of clear our docket a little bit. And maybe if we know, say, you know, January is a 2 meeting month and we have a lot of those applications for receipt, we can potentially be really thoughtful about in December. Okay, look at all of these applications for review, not receipt, for review. You know, perhaps we can stagger them depending on the size. I think the thing that comes up though is if we were to do something like that, everybody's going to want to go in the earlier meeting, right? Like everybody wants their pool, they want it right now. So they're not going to want to be necessarily to the second meeting.
The people that missed the first meeting by a day now only have to wait 2 weeks. So, I mean, you know, that's all kind of relative to when an applicant submits.
Right.
I like the idea of this, Commissioner Bassman. I like the idea of kind of noodling that over the next 30 days and making a decision in November. And that's going to fit the time frame, right? But that's the last month.
Yep.
It would fit the time frame.
I have one quick question. I mean, we looked at a couple of the items tonight that the applications were incomplete due to Commissioner Botta's, you know, looking at it. We have an incomplete application. Why are we even wasting our time? So when these applications are incomplete, why is the commission even seeing it on our schedule until they're completed applications?
Because when an application has been submitted, the commission has a certain window of time they have to act on it. We could certainly spend less time talking about it. I don't like to identify on the agenda if it's incomplete, because I don't know if it will be completed by the time that the agenda, you know, by the time the meeting comes around. So, I mean, when I identify something as incomplete, it's kind of up to the commission if they want to ask additional questions and find out more information, or if they want to take that at face value and kind of just move on.
I know one of the past practices that may be helpful to return to is, Jamie, when you do your kind of staff report at the beginning, to declare whether it's a complete or an incomplete application, along with the comment of whether or not it's actionable this evening.
Right. I have a past practice question for you. Do you recall if the commission has ever had a practice of not hearing applications at the meeting where they're for receipt?
This is Commissioner Bodo. We've always gotten at least a very high level, so that the applicant knew what they needed to bring to the next meeting, so that we didn't end up at the next meeting giving them a list of stuff that they had to go back and bring.
Yeah.
But good.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, why is it that is it statute that we have to post our full year's worth of meetings?
Freedom of Information Act.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The Freedom of Information Act. It's basically so that the public is aware of when we're meeting. You mean why we have to post our schedule for the next year?
Yeah, I mean, why can't we say that the commission normally meets on the second Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock, and additional meetings may be required, in which case those days will be posted on the town website, you know, something like that.
Well, it does. So it says additional meetings and field investigations, site walks will be scheduled as needed. Notices of these special meetings will be posted at the town clerk's office at least 24 hours in advance. The thing is, that makes it a special meeting. In special meetings, you can talk about stuff, but you can't receive applications and you can't add anything to the agenda. So,
okay, so then that begs the question of then why don't we schedule, I'm probably talking myself in a circle here, why don't we schedule 2 meetings a month? And then if there isn't enough activity to justify the meeting, you cancel the meeting.
That is one option. You just have to, I think, if you want to do that and actually have a standing chance of canceling that second meeting, have criteria for canceling it versus not canceling it. Because as soon as you get one person that says, "Oh, but you have to hear my application," you know, I need to have a clear line for saying, "Nope, the commission's only going to meet on this date if X happens." So I mean, I kind of like that idea as far as helping get people along with the time frames. And I think if you were to meet twice a month, it potentially helps reduce how many people are going to want to necessarily give that preliminary overview, knowing that they can talk to you again in 2 weeks, possibly, and or, you know, if their applications received that second meeting that you didn't even have. Because if you don't have a meeting, the application is still for receipt. Then when they first talk to you, it's actionable. So I don't know. There's a lot to think about, but if you want to have meetings and you're planning on canceling the second one on a standing basis, I think having a discussion as to what would trigger not canceling it outside of the commission deciding that at the first meeting of the month would be an important part of that process.
I don't know. At 10 o'clock at night, I'm not sure I'm ready to put my imprimatur on. You know,
all right,
schedule at this point. I feel free if anybody got any other proposals, but
think about it.
This
If you have
Commissioner
any thoughts that you want staff to investigate, let us know. Shoot Katie and I an email or call us, and we'll take a look at it. And we'll see if we can't get it resolved at the November meeting.
Okay.
Commissioner Begeman wanted to say something. You tried to jump in twice.
Commissioner Begeman, I was just going to say, it seems that sometimes things come before us that are for receipt, like the one today with the tennis, with the
Pickleball.
Pickleball.
No, I'm thinking about
the patio,
the pergola,
Patio,
and the golf, the artificial turf, and if that was for receipt, but it seems like maybe Jamie could tell people, like, this is going to need an A2 survey, this is going to need this is going to need this, right? So that we don't have to say that she can say that, or when somebody gives you something, Jamie, you, as soon as you get it, you have to show it to us.
No, I so that was kind of a unique one in the sense that looking at the site history and the process of things.
I think he wanted us to do his job for him.
Well, I suggest I'll take responsibility for that. I suggested he come to the commission and talk to you about whether I told him these things that would possibly be required. I tried to have a list of them so that it would be a quick conversation. You guys could say yes or no. Those things haven't been required on some of the historic applications, but you know, the historic applications, different practice. So I think just based off of that, I wanted confirmation before I sent him out, and then, you know, he got all these things that he didn't potentially need to get. So I do think that sometimes that is helpful, unfortunately, but I will try to minimize that in the future.
So
Okay.
it's 9:57, and I am gonna
Just quick
You gonna make a motion
comment.
to adjourn?
Last thing,
That's what
Southwest
you're gonna
Conservation
do.
District support letter was received. The town does plan on contributing. It's been budgeted. Yay.
Yay.
All right, I can do it now so we can be out before 10.
Yep.
Yes,
I
do it.
make a motion that we adjourn.
And a second.
Commissioner Second.
Okay, everybody seconds it. Everybody. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Thank you.
guys.
Enjoy the
Thanks.
weekend, guys. It's
Bye-bye.
gonna be a rainy one.
Bye.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.